Hello and welcome to the Westside Meetup Kapolei Zoom version. Uh, Everybody knows that I like to start off by thanking everyone for coming and spending your time here with us. Some of you may know me and know that my belief is your most important asset is your time, and you decided to spend it with us. So thank you. Although we're not able to meet in person, I'm very thankful that we do have this opportunity to still be able to come together, to talk, to learn, to be with each other, regardless of whatever situation is going on outside. And on that note, I wanted to make sure that everybody who has not been on our meeting before, and this is maybe your first time being here or don't know who I am, my name is Jasmine Kallio. My husband is CJ Kallio. We are part of WNN Properties. We are buy and hold out-of-state investors who we create portfolios of passive income real estate investments for ourselves and our clients. We created this networking meetup. We like to first remember that this is a networking group, even though we are on Zoom. And we created this a couple years back while we were meeting in person. And the only opportunities you really had was to meet in person and in town. So being that I was in Kapolei, we'd have to drive all the way to town during the time that they were building the rail, and the traffic was just terrible. We'd get there, somebody would be up on the stage and they'd talk with a PowerPoint presentation for like 3 hours, and then they'd start networking and I had to go home. And it was too much. So we decided that, hey, you know what? Let's just start something here. So we started a group on the West Side, and we've been meeting ever since. And we decided that it would be mostly about networking. We would want to be able to add value and educate at the same time as networking. So how the event goes is we have a guest speaker, they speak, we do some questions and answering, and then we network. But given the circumstances today, it's harder to do that, especially when you can't meet in person. So we have changed the way that our meetup goes while we're online, where we still have the guest speaker and we still have questions and answers, but the questions will be asked on chat. So if you do have any questions throughout while he's speaking, or anytime while we're doing the questions and answerings, please feel free to put it on chat. But while we're doing the actual speaking time frame, we ask for everybody to stay muted and allow for the speaker to speak until the questions come up. And when we read the questions, you're welcome to say simply, I have a question, and if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask that, we would absolutely permit that as well. And for any other things you'd like to come up, you'd like to bring up afterwards, we do this Zoom for 1 hour. It is recorded. And after that, we stop it. And if you'd like to stay afterwards and speak and talk and chat and network as best we can on Zoom, then that'd be fantastic as well. Me and my husband stay and to hang out and talk as well. So to start off our meeting, we do like to stay prompt and stick to the time frame. Our guest speaker is Daniel Young. Daniel is an estate planning lawyer working at the law offices of Rowan and Young. Daniel specializes in trusts and estates, wills, asset protection, and related business and tax matters. Before Daniel graduated from William S. Richardson School of Law, he wanted to join his father's successful real estate estate planning law practice to help the local people of Hawaii. Daniel also has a master's in business administration and 2 business bachelors from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Daniel helps his family invest and manage real estate properties. One of the reasons we like to ask Daniel to come we've asked him several times, and he's come every year very willingly to give his time to be with us. And important aspects to him is the fact that he does, in fact, invest in real estate with himself and his family. They have been longtime real estate owners and investors. He manages their portfolios, and he understands where we are coming from on the law perspective. So with that information, I'd like to introduce Daniel.
Thank you, Jasmine. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Jasmine? Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for having me all back again, guys. I also should add in that CJ and Jasmine are personal friends of mine. So I like to do this for them. We're all friends. and you know, they have questions all the time. So they've learned a lot over the years, and my job is, I guess, to get the ball rolling for a lot of you people. I know there's a lot of questions, so I try to, or at least today, I'm going to have it very open-ended. So I might just talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I might ramble, but then there's always the real estate that I know you guys want to talk about. So I'm probably going to focus more on that. So like Jasmine said, I'm an estate planning attorney. I work with my dad. Our family has a lot of real estate. So we've been, actually my grandparents first got into the rental business a long time ago. So they got into it and they got my parents into it. And now I help my parents manage our real estate. And so as an estate planning attorney, we also do business side things. So we set up LLCs and we know the ins and outs of those things and how those play with rentals. And so I'm here really to talk about that, and I do every time. But maybe this year, if it's okay, I'd like to make a comment about the current situation, which is coronavirus. So one of the things, no matter what you do, one of the best things is to be proactive. In other words, have a plan before an opportunity comes along. And I know the coronavirus is kind of out there now, and I know it looks kind of bleak, but I'll share with you some of the talks that I've been having with my dad and our plans, and probably you have plans too. I've talked to CJ and Jasmine too about this, and that's the upcoming, and a lot of people believe there's going to be a lot of upcoming foreclosures and houses for sale. You know, we can't escape it. There's a lot of unemployment in the country. The CARES Act money is about to run out. When that money runs out, people are going to have to rely on their own savings to pay their rents and mortgages. And when they can't pay, when that money dries up, then they'll be forced to either foreclose or sell their house or move out and rent somewhere. And so a lot of companies, you know, a lot of landowners are looking at this as an opportunity to jump in. Of course, when that'll happen is we're not sure yet. But we do know that the money runs out this month with July. So the last stimulus check for the first round, there are talks of the second round, which are going to come out. But then once that money is gone, people have to dip into their savings, if people have savings at all. And so we're trying to position ourselves, and maybe you guys should too, if you have money squirreled away, if you have stuff that you want to leverage, that time is probably coming up. And so even I was talking with CJ the other day, we went, I was asking him, so what do you see coming up, you know? And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities around. And then of course, anything I say tonight is not legal advice. It's just general information and general advice. You can listen to what I say, but you have to be smart about your own situation, your own finances, and the amount of risk that you yourself are willing to take on. And so, you know, if you have money on the side, there might be a good time coming up to invest in real estate. But then my job as an attorney, right, is to make sure that your stuff is protected, right? So asset protection, we use irrevocable trust, we use LLCs. And so that's really where I want to start with today's lecture. So I'll start with the most basic thing. Like, most people don't know what trusts are, and how trusts play with your overall rental plan. It really depends on what you have and what you want to do. Now, a lot of people get LLCs for the asset protection, and that's one of the misconceptions I want to clear up from the beginning. A revocable living trust does not give you any asset protection, okay? Revocable trusts are used for a lot of things, but asset protection is not one of them. Of course, we can use irrevocable trusts for asset protection, but that's kind of a different animal altogether. And so the LLC tends to be the good choice. So what's an LLC? Well, you guys are probably savvy enough. You guys know that an LLC is a limited liability company, right? So it's a company. It's not your stuff. When you have an LLC, you separate your personal stuff from your business stuff. And why is that important? Because, well, the way the asset protection works, if your stuff is owned by an LLC and the LLC gets sued, you don't lose your personal things. And vice versa too. If you have a lot of your stuff in an LLCs and you get sued personally, they cannot touch your, well, I don't want to say they can't ever touch your LLC stuff, but it does provide a layer of asset protection. And so we use LLCs for a lot of situations too. So not only to protect from like slip and falls and lawsuits against real properties, but in some cases, we can use it for a lot of other things. Like the other big thing that people like LLCs for is the taxes. So it's a business, right? It's a full-blown business. So you're allowed to take all the business deductions you want. You're allowed to take advantage of the pass-through income. You're allowed to do ABC, XYZ, and you're allowed to do it. And there are qualifications here too. But with the pass-through income, you can take your rental income and you only get taxed on 80% of it. That's a good start. One of the biggest questions I get asked most recently, is how are the taxes, what is the tax law doing? What other taxes can I take advantage of? So we frequently work with you and your CPA, to, of course, take as much deductions and write-offs as possible. But there's a bigger question that I think that has to be addressed, and that is the overall change in the tax law. So as we all know, President Trump got into the presidency, and whether you like him or not, he actually did a lot of good things for taxes for normal people. He raised the tax exemption to 11 million. So the estate tax, the inheritance tax, if there is one, the exemptions are all $11 million, which means you don't pay any estate tax unless you're giving away more than $11 million. And of course, there are other things like the standard deduction, which he doubled, which is nice. So back to the big question. What about taxes coming out? What should I do now? And actually, we don't have an answer to that. And it's because this is an election year. So Donald Trump has been very adamant about supporting businesses and putting money in people's pockets. But and I'm not speaking like my political side or anything, but if Joe Biden wins the presidency, he has made announcements that he is going to change a lot of Donald Trump's tax laws. Of course, what he's going to change it to and what's actually going to get passed and come out of Congress, we have no idea. But these are all things to think about. And so when you're setting up for things, you want to take advantage of the good opportunity. You want to take advantage of taxes if you can, but we don't know what those are going to look like. We'll see after the election in November, I guess. But other than that, this is the environment we're living in right now. These are the situations you have to address before you get to, the minutia of, what about my specific LLC and my rules and what I want and how these things work. So we we have to look at the overall picture and we just do the best we can. You know, we have clients that say, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And I'll tell you guys right now, nobody as smart as they are can predict the future. Everything is a calculated risk. And so one of the things I should say is be comfortable with the risk you're going to take. And so I also get frequently asked, should I have an LLC? Well, it depends. You do not need an LLC, but think of it like a spare tire. Do you need a spare tire? Well, you don't need a spare tire, but if something goes wrong, you'll be really glad you had it. And such is the same with LLCs. Hopefully you'll never get sued. Hopefully nobody gets hurt. Hopefully a million things don't go wrong. But if something does go wrong, you'll be really glad you've separated your personal things from your LLC things. And so that's the LLC in a nutshell. Some other questions I get about LLCs is, oh, should I have one LLC for each property, or should I just have one and throw them all in one? And a lot of people have a lot of different answers to that question. And there's not exactly a right or wrong answer, because you have to be, again, comfortable with your own level of risk. You could have 10 properties in one LLC, but if that one LLC is successfully sued, then all 10 properties are up for grabs. And then, of course, you could go the other direction, which is, I don't want to say it's overkill, but if you put each property in its own separate LLC, every time somebody wants a piece of it, they're going to have to go through the protection 10 times to get to all 10 properties. And so you have to weigh those kind of things against, like, yes, it's better to have 10 for 10, but, oh, can I afford 10 LLCs? Can I keep up with the paperwork for 10 LLCs? Can I stick with the compliance rules? Can I manage this? Do I need help? And so all these questions, they really come down to what you're comfortable doing and how much risk you're willing to take on. So if I'm asked, like, should I put one LLC, should I have one LLC per property? How do you feel? You know, we tend to separate at least somewhat, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And so in the same way, you don't want to put all your rentals in one LLC. So one of the other questions I remember I was asked about was about series LLCs. That's an interesting question, and a question that Hawaii lawyers, we don't have to deal with. And the simple explanation is because we have no laws that allow series LLCs in Hawaii, so we don't have to worry about it. Of course, if you're looking into investing with CJ and Jasmine, like in Kansas, Kansas laws allow series LLCs. And so, well, I should back up for a second. What's a series LLC? Well, a series LLC is an LLC that treats every property like it's its own separate LLC. So there's lots of protection there. Of course, you have to make sure that the state that you're in allows for it. Hawaii is not one of those, so we typically don't deal with it. But of course, there's a time and place, and it's still a lot of paperwork to manage. So LLCs are great. Do you need one? No. Should you have one? Probably. And remember, the purpose of the LLC is to protect yourself and your assets, right? So maybe the question before that is, do you have something worth protecting? If you have something worth protecting, you probably want to look at getting an LLC, or at least putting something in a trust, or how these things work together. Anyway, so that's a little bit, another big question. I just remember off the top of my head that I get sometimes is if I have, and especially for CJ and Jasmine, if I have rental properties in other states, should I make an LLC here in Hawaii or should I make one there? Short answer, and it's kind of a consensus amongst the lawyers, you should have an LLC in the state you own the property. So while it is possible to have one of my Hawaii LLCs be set up and allowed to run in another state, you know, you can do that. But then you'd be going through how you say, two strings of red tape. You'd have to be going through that state's laws. And then because the LLC is originally founded in Hawaii, you'd have to go through Hawaii's laws too. So there's two layers you'd have to go through. So you want to, general information, you want to have an LLC set up in this where the property is. One of the most common misconceptions I get from clients is, so if it's a Hawaii LLC and the property's in California, we can make the California property follow Hawaii's laws, right? No, absolutely not. So we have something called the law of situs in this country, which means wherever the property is physically, that physical boundary gets to make the laws for it. So you have a California property, well, California they get jurisdiction over it because it's physically located in California, no matter what LLC owns it, no matter how many LLCs from other states own it. And so, yeah, long story short, if you're gonna buy property in other states, you should have an LLC created and operating in that state. Let's see, what are some other big questions I get about LLCs? I know this is free form, but I thought there'd be more questions off the top of my head. Did you guys have any questions so far about anything I've said? Otherwise, I know Jasmine made a great list of some general LLC questions. Let's see.
But Dan,
Yeah.
I actually had a question for you. So you said a couple of times paperwork and compliance rules. Could you explain some of that with LLCs that you were saying each one might have?
Sure. So the paperwork has to, so nobody likes paperwork. In fact, you're gonna most likely, if you don't want to do it yourself, you can pay an accountant or someone to do it for you. But paperwork is really important for asset protection. So if we look into the specific laws of LLCs, the way the asset protection works is because it's actually treated and looks like a separate business. Okay, so when you start, if you have a separate LLC and you start treating it like it's your own personal stuff, the courts will cut through it like it's nothing, and there's no asset protection. So you have to follow the rules when you have an LLC. You have to do the annual filings. If you have to keep up with the paperwork. If you're gonna have like special ways of making changes, you have to have like minutes and meetings, and you have to file with the proper authorities. You should have a separate business bank account. So it's really not as bad as you think it is. You just open a separate bank account and say, okay, all the bank account money is gonna go, I mean, all the rental property has to go in this account. And if I'm gonna take anything out, I need to either declare a distribution, which your CPA or your tax preparer will help you with. But, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting way off topic. The question was about the paperwork itself. Okay, so there's one thing I want to talk about that's really important. And I've had this question a lot too. Sometimes people just want to just go online and get an LLC. And you have to be extremely careful because many people or clients of ours have gone online and they, everybody wants to save money and that's fine. So they end up paying $100 for their LLC online. and then they end up coming back to us in the end anyway, and they say, hey, what about, I'm getting sued, what about the asset protection in my LLC? And I'll look at it and say, you don't have any asset protection. And they'll say, what do you mean? Like, I have it registered and I paid $100 to have this, like, I have the articles and it's recorded at DECA and everything. And I'll say, no, you don't get it. The asset protection doesn't come from the articles. It comes from the operating agreement, which is something that a lot of online vendors don't give you. In case you guys are wondering, just to file the articles, the articles itself is just basic information about your LLC. What's the name? What's the business address? What's the name of the agent? Who's the organizer? It's one page front and back. It costs $25 in Hawaii to fill out. So, paying someone else $100 to do this for you, I don't understand. But people just don't know sometimes. And the other thing people don't know is that the asset protection is not in filing the articles. Okay? The asset protection is in the operating agreement. And so if you buy something and there's no operating agreement, there's no asset protection. On the articles itself, if you say you have asset protection and you check the box, it doesn't mean you really have asset protection, because there's the legal presumption that there's an operating agreement behind the articles. The operating agreement is the thing that gives you the asset protection. And you have to be aware that a lot of these online places, they don't have one, or they charge you an arm and a leg for it after you've registered or paid for the articles. And even if you buy an operating agreement, you still have to be a little careful, because operating agreements, what they are essentially is the how things work in your business. So things like, how easy is it to trade partners, to have new partners on, or to take distributions and stuff. All those decisions are chances to protect your money. And so when you get this online operating agreement, you're really getting the very basic cookie cutter operating agreement there is online. Of course, if you're actually sued and you have one of these cookie cutter operating agreements, will it hold up in court? I don't know. I hope so for your sake. But does it guarantee asset protection? I'm not so sure, because those operating agreements are not tailored specifically for renters and rental properties. So you have to be careful about that. And that's also one of the paperworks you really need to have, because there is no asset protection without the operating agreement. I hope that answered that question. Oh, I kind of rambled on a little bit. Sorry, Jazz. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I think that did really well. And then, of course, as you were saying, after the operating agreement, you have to do what it says, right?
Yeah.
So, what are some things that are common in those types of agreements that people have to do? Besides,
right. That's absolutely correct. So, if you pay someone to make this operating agreement for you, and it says you're supposed to have a meeting, supposed to have recorded minutes, and you're supposed to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you don't do any of those things, and you're not aware you're supposed to do any of those things, the court will look at this and be like, this isn't a real LLC. There is no asset protection because you didn't follow any of the rules that you set up for yourself. And so, you just have to be careful. The operating agreement, it can be amended, it can be changed as many times as you want. But if it comes down to it, if there really is litigation, you better make sure that you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. So, yeah. Any other questions about that
Actually, I'll just start with the questions. We are at about half an hour in, so I would like to
okay.
make sure we get all these questions that have been put in.
Okay.
I'd like to start with Jen. You just said I do, so I'm assuming you had a question if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Jen. I can hear you.
Great. My question was thoughts of basically just having an umbrella insurance policy in addition to having assets or properties within an LLC. And trailing along that, Brad P actually asked a very similar question. What's the difference in having an umbrella insurance policy to protect you when getting sued versus having an
Okay, so great question. And insurance actually plays a very pivotal role in the protection of your LLC. So as far as specific insurance plans, you might want to just contact the insurance company itself and see what they have to offer you. Of course, umbrella is fairly safe because it's an umbrella policy. But the way insurance plays out in lawsuits is very important because really, if you get sued, the very first line of defense is the insurance company. So someone slips and falls on your property and they sue you and you lose. It really is your fault, okay? The first line of defense is the insurance companies will pay them off, and that'll be the end of that. Of course, you want to make sure you have enough insurance. If it's a really bad case, situation, lawsuit, insurance will only cover up until a certain amount. Of course, that depends on how much coverage you want to pay for. But after that, then it's up to you to pay the rest. But anyway, if we're talking about rentals, generally houses are required to have insurance anyway. You know. Sorry, did that answer your question, Jen?
I guess, yeah, I guess I was just wondering if it was like, yeah, I guess that does. Yeah, I didn't really think about having the insurance, or rather, I didn't think that the insurance would be like the first line of defense. I just figured it would just be like an additional padding, I guess. If that
Oh,
makes sense.
yeah. No, I get you. So I want to make sure, and this is a great question for everybody, okay? So I think what the heart of your question was is, if I have an LLC, do I not have to get insurance? And the answer to that is you absolutely need insurance because one, it's generally required by law. And like I said, it's the first line of defense. So even before costly litigation, the insurance people will come in, they'll step in first. And there's been a couple times where the insurance companies have come in and saved you from very costly litigation. Somebody like slips and falls, you just file a claim with your insurance company and they pay them off and thank you, goodbye. And that's it. Yeah. Great question though. Any other questions?
Sure. Let me go on with the rest of these questions that we have in the chat room.
Sure.
I heard from a real estate attorney in Chicago that I do not need an LLC on my 4-unit or less properties because it does not save me from a liability claim. It would help with contractual claims. He said, just make sure I have a lot of insurance.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So my first disclaimer is the laws in Hawaii are different from the laws in Chicago, but I understand his thinking. And this actually is deeply rooted in the answer I just gave. So in some states, you're not required to have, or it's not recommended, you don't need an LLC unless it's a real legitimate big LLC. A 4-unit or duplex or like 2 duplexes might not be big enough to warrant getting an LLC and setting it up. And so his comment about just getting a lot of insurance is the same thing I said about the previous question, because it's really just treated as 4 small units, which might be equal to 1 big house. So one big line of insurance might probably be enough to cover it, the first line of lawsuits. But then, of course, now the second question is, if the lawsuit is so big, so costly that insurance doesn't cover it, and you don't have an LLC, well, by law, they're allowed to come after the rest of your personal assets. So, yeah, no, that's actually a pretty. I understand that lawyer's law line of thinking. Yeah, but that's just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you. The next question is there a series LLC in the state of Missouri? That's a yes. And also,
Okay.
is there a LLC recommended if it's available? Is the series LLC recommended?
Okay, so yeah, so series LLCs, like I said, I don't know which 50 states have them and don't have them. I only practice in Hawaii. Hawaii doesn't have them. If you have a series LLC, it would be good for you because the way it works is like you have parent companies, and that parent company has child companies or subsidiary, or I mean, smaller businesses under that big parent company, and they all are afforded separate LLCs, separate protection. So should you have one, yeah, you can have one. There's no harm in having one, but you have to remember at the same time, you have to still treat each one separately, and you have to still have separate accounts for each one. Like, so for example, if I have a series LLC called, I don't know, I'll call it series LLC, and then I have my first house, I'd have a bank account that says series LLC bank account only for property 1. And so, you still have to differentiate that money, and you still have to treat them separately. But yeah, if you can get one, you should get one. They try to cut down on the paperwork, which is kind of nice too. But you still got to treat them all separately.
Awesome. And I was also told that it's never truly been tested, the series LLCs, in a major court case as well. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so I got to check the most recent law on that, but there's a couple questions about that. So you don't want to be that first test case where they say, oh, you know what? We're going to ignore this series LLC protection. But the other question that more frequently or more recently came up is, if you have a series LLC in like another state and you're sued in a state like Hawaii that doesn't recognize series LLCs, does the asset protection stick? And the same answer, we're not entirely sure. It would really depend on the situation and the state. But of course, the goal is to be proactive and to protect yourself as much as possible before actually, testing it on yourself. Yeah, but yeah. Okay.
That works, definitely. Next question. Are you able to put a mortgage under an LLC?
Oh, great question. Great question. So one of the biggest problems, yes, problems we have when we're making an LLC is the timing of the purchase of the house, okay? If you have an LLC first and then you buy the property, then no problems, right? You just get a commercial mortgage, commercial loan, or whatever you want to do. It's all business rates, and they just treat you like a business from the beginning. But you have to be extraordinarily careful, because we've had clients get into a lot of trouble by first buying a property and having it in their own names with a mortgage, and then they transfer it to an LLC, okay? When you transfer your interest to an LLC, by law, that's treated as you giving away that piece of property. And so first thing that happens is most mortgages have something called a due on sale clause, which means, which generally reads something like, if you sell your property, the entire mortgage, balance of the mortgage becomes due immediately. And so just by transferring it to your own LLC, the banks see that as a due on sale clause trigger. And so you got to be really careful. If you transfer your house to an LLC and there's still a mortgage on it, the banks are most likely going to come and say, hey, you just triggered the due on sale clause, and we are here for the balance that you owe us, the other, $300,000, payable today. Oh, geez. Of course, there are reasons why people would want to, you want the asset protection, but the cleanest way to do it is just set up the LLC and then buy the property through the LLC. Now, I want to make a small comment about that. There are a handful of banks, and they're not a lot, but there are some. If you ask your bank, hey, is it okay if I transfer this property that I own to my LLC without triggering the due on sale clause, will you let me do it? Some banks will allow you to do that. But I wouldn't bet on it. So you can ask your bank if they'll do that, but most of them will consider that a transferring away of the property and want to get paid immediately.
Great stuff. And just on that note, have you ever known anybody who's actually or any cases of that you've actually heard of the person being actually asked or had to pay the due on sale clause and pay off the bank?
That's a good question. So as a lawyer, we're actually very careful. So we advise all of our clients to be very careful when they do that. Do we have any clients that have had to pay it? No, because we always advise them not to do it unless, they have something in writing from the bank or some other way to transfer it. But yeah, you got to be extremely careful with that transfer.
Awesome. The next question simply asks about foreign entities.
Okay, so there's a lot of different foreign entities. Can you specify like a specific question about it?
Nope, totally up to you.
Foreign entities, okay.
Are they worth doing then?
Okay, are they worth doing? It depends, like if by foreign entity you mean like an out-of-state LLC, yeah, go nuts, have as many as you want, but if it generates any income, you got to pay taxes. If there are losses, I mean, foreign, unless you're talking about out of the country, now that would be an entirely different ball game because oh man, I don't know if I want to talk about this. You guys have watched like gangster movies where like the mafia will like put all their money on an offshore account in like the Cayman Islands, so the United States IRS can't get to it and all that. Okay, so firstly, I'll make a comment about those kind of foreign entities. Those shell companies, they actually sometimes work. It depends on if that country has a treaty with the United States. So actually I don't believe I'm going to tell this story. So I actually had a client who wanted to set up an account in Switzerland because Switzerland is known for, being really great with keeping private information, even from the US. But unfortunately, depending on how you look on it, I don't remember when, but Switzerland and the America, they signed a treaty some time ago and say, all right, we'll allow you to have access to these records and the money if you can prove that there was a crime that took place. So I don't know what I'm supposed to say about foreign entities. You can have them. What you do with them is up to you. But you know, there are better ways to hide drug money.
Fair enough. Okay, so can you create an LLC for an out of state, or do we have to go to an estate attorney in the other state?
Oh, that's a great question. You do not need an attorney to set up an out-of-state LLC for you. You could, in fact, there are government websites. Some counties and some states, they have a whole website. You know, if you want to set up your own LLC, like click here, fill out the paperwork, send it back to us, and it's pretty straightforward. You do not need a lawyer to help you set one up. But you know, generally, like, it's nice to have an attorney who knows what they're doing to help you. But if you want to just start off small, it's totally fine to try and set it up on your own without a lawyer.
Great. Patricia asked, if an LLC is set up after acquiring an investment property, how do you protect the property through the LLC? I guess she's asking about transferring.
What to the LLC?
If an LLC is set up after acquiring an investment property, how do you protect the property through the LLC?
Oh, okay. So the asset protection, or the property gets protected by being owned as an asset of the LLC. So until the house is put in the LLC, there's not any protection. So then we go back to the due on sale clause. Then we go back to the insurance for that property. So you can set up an LLC after you buy the property, and the way you put the property in the LLC is by a deed. So the deed is the legal device that transfers title from one entity or one owner to the next. So you needed to say that I transfer my LLC, my property to the LLC, and now the LLC is the owner, and all the protections that the LLC has now extends to that property. So when you're putting properties into an LLC, you want to make sure you're not going to trip that due on sale clause. You don't want to you don't want to suddenly be hit with $200,000 or $400,000 bill, and you don't want to lose that house either. So one of the ways we've handled that particular situation, and it's not foolproof, is we do something called an assignment of interest, which is a legal document that says all my interest in this property, I hereby assign it to the LLC. And so some places will say, oh, okay, so you've pretty much given your interest in the property to the LLC. But of course, there are other legal problems with that, because the correct way to transfer legal title is you have to actually have a deed. And that's the thing that trips the due on sale clause. But yeah, getting the property into the LLC, it can be done. Another thing that we also like to help people do is like pay down the mortgages as quickly as possible. Oh, and maybe you guys have heard of that. So like there are some companies out there like Sweep Strategies or whatever, and you know, I got to talk with some of the head guys. I actually worked with Santos Kids some time ago when he used to be there. And so they have some ideas. You know, there are ways to knock down your mortgage quickly with lines of credits and stuff like that. So, you know, you just got to be careful. Sorry, I totally rambled on that one.
Okay, we actually have about 10 more minutes, so I'm just going to try to, we'll try to hit as many of these we can. And if you're willing,
Okay.
would you be willing to stay a little bit later and answer a couple more?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Vincent asked, can you please comment on the strategy of having your LLC flow through a trust?
Yeah. So when you say flow through, I'm assuming you mean getting both advantages of the trust and the LLC. So actually, it's pretty simple. So everything in the LLC gets all the benefits of the LLC, and everything in the trust gets all the benefits of the trust. So the simple thing we do is we put the entire LLC in the trust. So that way, the rental property is in the LLC and the LLC is in the trust. So we essentially get both advantages at the same time. If the question is about pass-through income, though, the way it works is typically the same way. No matter what profits or losses you get, they pass through the LLC, and it becomes trust income, which is also taxed to you at ordinary income rates. So, in fact, there's a way you can, without making it overly complicated, the LLC will handle it by making it taxable directly to you. So as ordinary income.
Great.
Okay.
Is it possible to transfer an LLC property in your own name and it doesn't have a mortgage?
Is it possible to transfer an LLC property you mean take it out of the LLC and put it back in your own name? Is that what the question is?
I'm assuming she means that if you transferred your property into a mortgage, into an LLC and it didn't have a mortgage, you wouldn't have the due on sale, so you should be fine, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. There's no due on sale if there's no mortgage. If the mortgage is paid off, the mortgage is released, and all the horrible things that come along with mortgages, they all disappear.
Awesome. Okay, Jan asked, if I plan to purchase a property out of state as a flip or BRRRR, and I have a Hawaii LLC, do you recommend setting up a foreign entity?
Oh, good question. And this goes back to the thing I talked about earlier. Generally, this is a little different because if you're doing fixing and flipping, it's not passive anymore. It's active. So if it's like your actual job. Oh, actually no. I'm sorry. I take that back. It's the same. You should, if you do work in another state like fix and flips, you always have to pay income tax to your home state. Do you need, I guess you don't need an LLC, but if you're going to actually like set up like a fix and flip business in a state, and you're going to do it again and again and again, like it's a normal, like it really is a full business, then you should get an LLC in that state where you're going to do it.
Great. Logan made a comment. He said, I believe Fannie Mae loosened up the due on sale clause for LLCs as long as the LLC is controlled by the original borrower.
Oh, yeah. So a couple things. Fannie Mae loans, right? Well, first of all, your loan has to be with Fannie Mae. If it's not, then you're back to your bank's terms. So I guess if your mortgage is with Fannie Mae and they allow it, then great. They're one of the few banks that will allow it. But I'm telling you, most banks will not allow it, and they will trigger that due on sale clause. So some banks will do it, and maybe Fannie Mae is one of them, but a lot of normal banks won't do that.
Good to know. And this is going to be our last question, and we're going to have CJ wrap this up. Katie asks, so the only way to get a mortgage under the LLC from the beginning is to get a commercial loan or no conventional loans? So no conventional loans.
Yeah. And, maybe I should talk about that for a second. If it's truly a rental property, the cleanest way is to have it purchased from the LLC. So the LLC is a business, right? So it's subject to commercial rates, commercial loans, and it's treated like a business loan, business mortgage, commercial side. But essentially, that's correct. You have to weigh that. If it's your own residence, okay, you give up some things, and this is what I probably want to tell you guys about. So I'll ask you guys, if you have your own house, your own residence, and LLCs are so great, should you put your house, your residence, into an LLC? Now, it really depends on the situation, but generally, the lawyers, do not advise it. Okay? And that's because there are certain benefits that you as a homeowner can get by, owning your own house in your own name. One of the biggest things is the capital gains exclusion. Okay, so your house, if you've lived in it, 2 of the last 5 years, let's say you bought a place for $500,000 and you sell it a couple, 2 years later for $750,000. That gain of $250,000, you're not taxed on. You get to keep the whole 250 without paying capital gains tax on that. And that's because it's an exclusion for homeowners. Okay, so and of course on the other side, if it's residential, if you're a person, they're typically different rates for normal people as opposed to businesses. The other thing that people talk about is getting the homeowner's exemption, right? If you want to save a couple $1,000s every year off your property tax, you can get, it's no question about it. The house is in your name. You can claim a real property tax exemption. Of course, we as a law firm have figured out a way to, if you're not using your homeowner's exemption, we have a way to take advantage of your homeowner's exemption on rental properties. Of course, we have to talk about the situation and stuff. It doesn't always work, but it's nice to save a couple $1,000s in property tax for your rental too. Yeah, so that's a great distinction between the commercial side and the residential side. Everything is different, but LLCs at their hearts are businesses, and so they're treated as such.
That's great. I do apologize. I do have one last question.
Okay.
The question is basically, how do we get in touch with you if we had any other further questions about investing or in asset protection for our investments?
Okay. Yeah. I will, of course, I'll leave my information with CJ and Jazz, and I don't know, how do you want to handle that? I could.
You can put it in the chat if you'd like.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then if anybody that he does, his office is with you and your father, you want to say their names and any information that you might have about your company.
Okay. So I'll just type it in the chat real quick. The law office that I'm at. So Rowan Young is my dad. Okay, so that's the law office, and the office phone number is that. But of course, if you just have like smaller questions, you can. I don't know. I'll stick around for a little bit, or you could. I don't know. You can ask CJ or Jasmine, and they'll pass the question to me, I guess. Otherwise, coronavirus. Social distancing, we all got to be safe. I'm here to help as much as I can. But yeah, I don't know, I'll be around for questions if you got them, if that helps.
Thank you, it does. CJ, would you like to end the meeting?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dan, for joining us tonight and sharing with us all your information. It's always nice to see you. It's been some time since our last get together. Well, like Dan was saying and sharing today, a lot of what he spoke about was general information. If you're seeking legal advice or counsel, I would highly recommend you reach out to your legal advice or counsel to get clarity. Preparation, understanding your strategy, what your intent is to do, all plays into the decisions that need to be made. Everything shared here is just for informational base. Uh, you could easily contact Dan and he would be helpful and willing to support you with any of your questions by reaching out to our offices. They do specialize in trust and estate planning, although they do come from an investing background. So it's very beneficial for all of us who are investors to be able to speak the same language with those who are we're working with. So with that being said, we'd like to conclude this meeting. We'll go into our section of uh, announcements and notes. So our meetup is held every last Wednesday of every month, except for the month of December. Due to COVID-19 and our restrictions on meeting, we are still planning on having this as a Zoom meeting at 6 p.m. on the last Wednesday. If you are not or have not already gotten on our email list, please connect with Jasmine directly in chat. We do not spam. We only send out a reminder the week before and the day of with the Zoom link, topic, and time. If there's any other questions or concerns, you're able to insert it into the chat. You can connect with us on our Facebook page. It's another platform we use to market, promote, and share our upcoming speakers. Next month, we will have an investor, Young, who will be sharing his testimony from his beginning of investing, knowing nothing, to where he's at currently, doing buy and hold out of state rental properties. He'll be sharing his ups and downs, trials, tribulations, the fears and successes of his journey so far. If anybody has any other questions, like we said before, we'd be willing to stay on. We'll keep the Zoom meeting line open, just not recorded, up until the last person wants to leave. Dan is offered his time to stay on a few minutes longer. So if you guys have any questions regarding the legal aspect, as soon as we cut the recording, we'd highly suggest you input into chat or unmute yourself. With that being said, we will conclude tonight's meeting and we'll see you guys again in a month. Thank you for joining us.